Hey 5th grade, welcome to your review video for next week's quest. I think you probably know a lot of this information, but I hope this serves as a good review and a study guide for your future studying. You know that we've been talking about the French and Indian War, or wars, and I'd like to know what it was also known as. I'll give you a second to think about it before I click. Do you know that the French and Indian War was also known as the 7 Years' War? Then you are correct. It was known as the 7 Years' War in Europe, and it was the French and Indian Wars here in North America. It was fought by two sides that we refer to as Half and Bick. I bet you remember a lot of these information as well, but you probably want to make sure that you have your spelling correct for this. So let's reveal this information. The H, of course, stands for Huron, and the A for Algonquin. Those are the two main native tribes that sided with the French, of course. And we used the L for love because they had a great dynamic between the groups, helping each other, supporting each other, and eventually fighting each other's enemies. For the Huron and the Algonquin, that would be the Iroquois. Remember, that's the hardest word in 5th grade to spell. Iroquois. The French had long been enemies with the British, so it only makes sense that the British would team up with the Iroquois to help fight for land in North America. The C is the colonists, who got dragged in this war whether they liked it or not, and learned certain aspects of native culture, like guerrilla warfare, during this war. So we know that the French and Indian War, and I added this picture here, just as a reminder, between the British and the French, was fought over a section of land. These are the two of the standards we've been working on. I'll leave them there for a minute. Let me scroll down to this map, which you'll see shows British land before 1763, the colonies. Their gains, Spanish land. Oh, don't forget about them down in La Florida and over here in Texas and Mexico. And then land that would have been French or Indian land. We know that the French and Indian War was being fought over one particular section, this section here. That Ohio River Valley. Do you remember why the Ohio River Valley was important? It was important because it would have been excellent fertile land, better than some of the rocky land that the colonists dealt with over here. It also meant access to the interior here and to trade. You can see that this river would have brought them to the Mississippi, and the Mississippi would have brought them to the Gulf of Mexico. A super highway of trade. So whoever controlled that was going to control all the trade for the continent. And the British and the French both wanted it. Now, 5th graders, if you are student ID number 1 through 5, that means you're 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 7'1", 7'2", 7'3", 7'4", 7'5", or 9'1", 9'2", 9'3", 9'4", 9'5", you know who you are. Your secret word is Woodstock. Please write that down on the back of your paper at the bottom of the page. Don't forget. After the war was over and England was victorious, they were in debt. And they felt like the colonists were the best people to pay for the debts they needed to recoup. They decided they needed to find the revenue from them because they had fought the war for them. Seems pretty simple. Colonists, of course, did not see it the same way. We know that England's approach to solving this crisis was to institute acts, which were laws, and many were some form of tax. So remember, Control-Alt-Delete the economy. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be as simple for the English as they thought it would be. This last screen represents a timeline of many of the things that we've been talking about and a few added pictures for a bonus. We know that the French and Indian War ended in 1763, and we can consider that war ending to really be the cause moving towards the American Revolution itself. Down here, you see where I wrote war. Because the French and Indian War ended, and because the Proclamation of 1763 was proclaimed, the colonists couldn't move west of the Appalachian Mountains into the Ohio River Valley as they wished, and they were held back. The soldiers were supposed to be there to keep an eye on them, right? To make sure they couldn't move over there, and that was very disappointing for them. If your student ID number is 6 through 10, then your secret word is Linus. Linus. Friend of Charlie Brown. Okay, let's continue. So the Sugar Act was the first of these different laws that was instituted in 1764, the first of this new wave that was created just to gain revenue back for England. And it was a tax upon the molasses, which then affected the production of rum, which led to some issues with the triangular trade. So there was quite a shock for the colonists of the Sugar Act, but even worse was the Stamp Act, which was instituted, we know, on different kinds of paper. Within that same year, 1765, was something called the Stamp Act Congress. And the Stamp Act Congress was actually a meeting of colonists, of delegates from certain colonies who got together to try to figure out what they were going to do. And we know that the colonists hadn't been very united. You can picture that join or die flag. And they had really needed to find a way to get more united, or they were going to suffer the consequences. Within the same time period came the Quartering Act. And the Quartering Act said the colonists had to pay to house and feed any soldiers that didn't have any space for in the barracks or the quarters within their city, like Boston. Now, you know the colonists weren't happy with this. They didn't want the soldiers there at all. And the soldiers, they thought they were kind of babysitting them or spying on them, so this was going to be a big issue. All of these laws are going to be repealed or canceled, with different parts popping back up again. Within the same time, though, the Sons of Liberty are going to form in Boston, and it's a response to how the colonists are going to help to deal with these unfair laws that they feel are an issue. We know the Sons of Liberty, although patriots, did some pretty bad things: tarring and feathering, harassing, ransacking, looting, protesting, boycotting, and a lot of their behavior really wouldn't be acceptable today. If you are student identification number 11 through 15, then your secret word is Sally, S-A-L-L-Y. The Townshend Acts, named after Robert Townshend, a British lord in the Parliament, was a law created after the Stamp Act which taxed a bunch of strange things: paper, glass, lead, paint, and of course, tea. Now, all those parts were repealed, as we know in the King George song, but they left the tea part as its own Tea Act, which would eventually, of course, lead to the Tea Party. Before the Tea Party, though, we had the Massacre, which you should hopefully all know about, and its issues in Boston. The colonists really started it. The soldiers fired out of fear, and the colonists made it a much bigger deal than it should have been. If your student ID number is 15 to 20, then your secret word is Patty, P-A-T-T-Y. The Boston Tea Party came as a response to the Tea Act. The colonists were unhappy that only seven groups were chosen to sell tea in Boston, and that the tea all had to be purchased from the British East India Company. Now, what's crazy is colonists were smuggling in Dutch tea, like John Hancock. The Dutch tea was actually more expensive than the British tea. The British tea was cheaper. But out of principle, out of the idea, the colonists refused to continue to pay for that tea to support that one company and support those only 7 men who were chosen to sell the tea. They thought if that was going to happen with tea, what would happen next? So we know that they held their town meeting the night of December 16, 1773, and then some of the Sons of Liberty traveled to the harbor, dumped the 342 chests of tea into the harbor, and the rest, as we say, is history. Following shortly after that in January, Parliament punished Boston for the intolerable acts, 5 laws to punish them. The 2 that are most important for us are the closing of Boston Harbor and the ending of town meeting. If you are a student ID numbers 20 to 24, your secret word is Charlie, as in Charlie Brown. We're almost done. Now, in September of 1774, 9 of the 13 colonies got together with delegates to hold what they called the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. They talk about that in the second verse of the George Viva La Vida song. And they really had to figure out what were they going to do. They had all these issues. Things were getting worse. Things were not getting better with Parliament and with the king. And was war inevitable, or could they stop it from happening? We're on the road to war. We're getting close. And I want you to think about how these different acts led to that, especially back here at the beginning. Hopefully you were able to fill out your green or white study guide, and you will have it in class for Friday. Don't forget to study all the other things and to visit the quizzes and quests page, the rest of the page on the wiki. It's Miss Sellers signing off.